Right. What's up?
What's up?
We're live.
From the the power of Grayskull. It seems like every time we try and do this, some kind of internet or some kind of technical catastrophe.
Yeah.
I'm just going to call it Gremlins. There's two references, that throwback references for you.
Like the
He-Man
movie Gremlins?
Oh, and the movie Gremlins.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
going back to the 80s.
Yeah. We're just going back. Yeah. My mom, she was watching, like, I guess they had some kind of throwback or something, because it's not actually on MTV, but she was watching all these old, like, 80s MTV videos this morning, just so you don't have to, want to hurt yourself by watching the news. She, 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 she's opted for, you know what? I'm just going to put this on because it sounded good, and it's so great to watch some of those videos.
Yeah.
Just, it's funny to me because I keep joking about the 80s production. It's like, how they were, I feel like music video directors back then, the studios probably didn't know just exactly how much money it would cost to do a video because it's in the early days. So you have all these like coked out directors that are like, it's gonna be $1 million. It's $1 million, and it's gonna take like $100,000 to shoot.
Yeah.
The other $900,000 is gonna go up their nose.
Yeah.
Because I was just watching like Simply Irresistible, the Robert Palmer video with all the supermodels and all that. And it's like you just watch a video and go, okay, here's what I need for the set, guys. Any place will be fine. I need 12 supermodel women, one microphone stand. I don't even need a cable, just a microphone. Robert in a suit. That's the budget, guys. What should we build a studio? $1 million. Yeah. It's probably going to take 50 grand to shoot that video. The girls probably did it for next to nothing because they probably didn't get paid enough. And everyone probably had a big Coke fueled party after it. So
I'm sure. Yeah,
I
that
kid.
reminds
I have
me
no agency to know anything I'm talking about. I'm literally talking out of my butt. But it just was funny to me to think about
But those
the
were the
simplicity
early
of those
days.
videos,
Yeah, those were the early days. That was
Yeah.
like reading Alex Van Halen's book, Brothers, and them talking about those early music videos that they did, and how weird of an experience it was because it was a totally new art form. There weren't really expectations yet. Now, of course, they're talking late 70s, but roll that into the 80s, things kind of get more formalized, probably mid to late 80s, but there was a lot of freedom there and a lot of a lot of characters and crazy ideas that should never have been videos. But
here we are.
What are you gonna do?
Yeah, it was just really fun, like, to go back and see some of that because I'm not watching any of those in forever. And I was like, oh my god, there was a time in which that was the art form. And of course now it's social media, and you have Instagram and TikTok and all these different places where you can share media more frequently. And mom asked the question, she's like, do they still make music videos? I'm like, well, yeah. We've done music videos.
Yeah. We've done a couple.
But the platforms, but the platforms change to go to, it's more YouTube and Vivo and places that will stream those videos. So you can kind of watch them without the need to have an MTV, if you will. And on YouTube, you can build channels that just have video after video after video, like playlists. So the media has changed a bit, but it's still very much a necessary art form.
Yeah, the way that people consume it is different too. So things have become a little more, I don't know if transient is the right word, but like, okay, so if it's 1984, you spend a bunch of money to make a video that's going to be on repeat.
Yeah, I think about the Jump video. I mean,
yeah,
just constant. played.
So it's going to get played a bunch of times for as long as that song is relevant. And if it's a hit song, it's going to be relevant a long time, you know. Nowadays, things move so fast that budget is smaller. You're not going to spend so much money making something that's going to be consumed a lot. You're going to make lots of little things.
That's right.
You know.
That's
And
right.
occasionally, you know, you're going to splurge. And there are people who check out music videos. Honestly, I haven't really watched music videos for most bands in a long time. I get surprised occasionally when I see a music video. I'm like, oh yeah. I mean, I know that we've done hours, and so they're a really cool way to commemorate a song and to do something different and have something to share with people. I think things are so visual these days. But I don't keep up with them like I did on the days when you would just put it on TV and and see it all the time. You know, it was just normal.
Yeah.
VH1 or MTV or whatever.
There's something nostalgic, obviously, for us, for me certainly, and I know for you too, because you're still in the era of MTV. You know, you're coming up when you're growing up, you're still in that era, and you got the tail end of some of that was still there before everything really shifted. But again, it's remarkable to see, well, the evolution of it, but also just how people they still find the medium of a music video important. But with technology and things, I mean, you can shoot videos now for your phone, you know, right off your phone. You can make something that's really pretty good quality and presentable. And if you have good creativity, there's so many different plugins and things now to enhance or make your videos look better, to add those little special elements that, if you go back to the 80s, they were just starting to figure those things out.
Yeah.
And, you know, some of those overlays and things that you see in some of those classic 80 videos now, you can just literally do that on a filter in Instagram now if you wanted that look. And some people go back, it's like they want to have that vintage look, or they'll go back to like 70s looking film or 80s film or something. All these different aesthetics that technology have allowed us to make more in your pocket.
Yeah.
So the ability for people to do videos or short form, long form, whatever your choice, is a little bit easier, I imagine, because you're not really having to go and get the big giant studio cameras and a lot of stuff that those videos were done on, you know?
Well, yeah. And I mean, the process of editing.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're in the 80s
simple.
and you're trying to edit off of whatever cameras they're using back then, I couldn't even tell you what they were using in studios. That process is not accessible compared to now. You can, you know, you do it on your phone, CapCut, iMovie, Final Cut, DaVinci, whatever. You've got a full suite, or, you know, there's AI editing now.
Yeah.
So you can just let it auto chop your stuff up and just call it a day, you know?
Yeah. I'm not quite there.
You know,
maybe I'll get there in time.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see.
You know,
I don't know. There's a place for that. Like, you know, I let AI edit these podcasts, but it's because the important thing is the conversation. It's not the visuals. I would feel weird giving away all the visual creative decision making to AI, but that's a different conversation.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. But it's kind of a good transition to what we're talking about today, which is really about the recording of the record as well, and some of the technology and stuff that we did, or at least what we were exploring on some of these new songs. Like, we talked a little bit about that last week, you know, and just the writing of the record. But there's always a journey kind of separate from that. When you have good ideas, you're also looking, or at least for me, maybe in parallel, you're always going, oh, I want another set of sounds. I'm really craving. And we often do this, for lack of a better word, because we both collect vinyl. It's like crate digging, except looking for tones or sounds to enhance or create something, or it creates a new idea. There's a song we have, of course, on this record that will hopefully be our first single, that literally I borrowed a synthesizer from a friend of mine who was so eager to want to show me this synth that he got. And I was playing around on there, and one of the first sounds that I pulled up was like this arpeggiated sound. And I only had borrowed this synth for a couple of weeks, and I promised him I would give it back because I just wanted to road test it a little bit and see what was on there. And that initial sound, I don't even know if you remember this, but that initial sound was on that synth that I got from Orlando. And
I had no idea that that was the case.
And I had found that, and then I realized like, oh, this is really cool. And I was kind of writing some stuff with it. But then I was like, shoot, I need to give it back to him. And then I went back to those sounds and I'm like, oh man, this is really great. Well, dang it, I don't have that synth anymore. And I really wanted to write a song with that arpeggiated sound that I found. So that's when I went on a quest to find that sound again. And that led me to Arturia, which is some of the synth, software synth stuff that I started getting into on this record. And that I was able to find something that was a pretty close proximity to what I initially had recorded. And that ended up being the kind of key synth element that is driving that song.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Okay. So just to give some parameters to the conversation and a little context, if you didn't listen to the episode before this, we talked about the writing process, so creating the songs. We kind of wanted to split up the conversations into a few different directions. So we talked about the writing process. I guess today we're going to talk about more of the production, the sounds, how we put it all together. I'd like to do a third conversation that's more about the actual recording process. So, getting takes, getting good performances. I think we both learned a lot about just how to get better at that through this process. There's nothing like, recording 12, 13 songs and slamming your head against the wall on a few of them for a while to make you level up. But we had touched on this in the last episode, but our first record was, we took sort of a old school approach, or at least a version of an old school approach, which was if we don't have the real thing, we don't use it. So it was, miking up a deluxe reverb. It was pedals in front of an amp, getting the sounds that way. It was synthesizer into a preamp, whatever sounds you could get out of that particular keyboard, the physical keyboard, that sort of mentality. And that was great. But I think this go around, we wanted to explore quite a bit further. And so I think we took that limitation off and said, okay, well, anything goes now. If you've got the real deal and that's what works, great. And I think we have a bit of mix and matching. Like one thing that I want to get into, one of our, well, I mean, I guess I'll speak for me, but I know I speak for both of us. Favorite band it is The War on Drugs. We love that band. And in trying to understand, because we had one song in particular that I feel like takes quite a lot of influence from them. It doesn't sound like them at all. So if I didn't tell you what it was, you probably wouldn't connect that dot. But there's a song on the record called Away From Us that we wanted to do something that felt like it belonged in that world, and it was sort of spaced out a little bit and never urgent, not written in a pop structure to where it's, just get to the point. It has interludes and it has texture and atmosphere. And so I know that you had did a whole lot of sort of research on how do they put these records together, because I mean their records sound amazing. A Deeper Understanding is like an all-time amazing.
That's a masterpiece record, top to bottom.
But you ended up finding out that they use this kind of obscure piece of gear that I had never heard of before, and now I'm blanking on the title of it.
The Solina.
The Solina, yeah. And so I know you got a hardware version of that, and then you also found a software version of that.
Both distinctly different, really. But I think here's a cool thing. So we were looking at, we wanted string arrangements in some of these songs, like And there's such a hodgepodge of things for me that get influenced and go into the soup of that. Like one of my favorite records is Urban Hymns from The Verve. And The Verve took an approach on those songs where they had a lot of violins or orchestration that's behind it. It's sort of cueing underneath the band. And I thought, oh, this is great. War on Drugs, of course. They have these really high piercing sort of strings that cut through anything in a mix.
Yeah.
And I'm going, man, a lot of times when you're trying to find that in a synth pad or even in a software synth, it just doesn't seem to want to cut through the guitar and drums of a rock band. And I'm like, what is it that they're using? So I would go and watch rig rundowns from these guys on War on Drugs and just kind of see what's some of the gear that they used. And I see that they have a vintage Solina that they bring out on stage, which is crazy to me because these things are like old vintage 70s gear that are just perfect condition. But when I saw that, I was like, I have to figure out how to get one because it was really the thing that I've been craving. And the sort of clarity of those high registered strings are so good. And it uses like tape loop style.
Yeah.
So I thought, man, I can find one. And Behringer makes one.
Kind of like a
hardware.
Mellotron, right?
A Mellotron. Yeah. Very similar.
Like the same sort of concept.
Yeah, same kind of concept, I believe. And some different things you can do, but it basically is a tape loop synth version of an orchestra, 5-piece, whatever. So you have violins and violas and all this stuff that you can kind of mix together. Anyway, I got the hardware version of that, was blown away. And that was something I think when I introduced that to us, it was like, it's like one of those light bulb moments when you bring a new piece of gear in, you go, oh yeah, this is definitely going to make it across the record. And it ended up getting used in a couple different spots on the record for us.
Quite a few. I feel like pretty much almost anywhere that needed strings.
Yeah. It was a signature piece of the record for us, was just using that in both versions. Like the software version has some really cool things that weren't obviously not available in the hardware or the real version of that. You know, some cool delays and things that you could do with it that were really neat. So there's some really great sounds that come from the software version, but the hardware version as well. I can't say enough good things about it. It's just one of those pieces of gear when you find it, you're like, okay, I could write a whole record with this, and find some really good use for it. And it ends up being a utility instrument. And we can kind of talk about some of those things too. Like there's utility sounds that we use that kind of show up, like a signature bass sound that I would use for a synth bass or something like that. We find these things that have worked for us in the past.
Yeah.
And I'll continue to find you use some of those things to punctuate a sound. But then there's just, unique instruments like the Solina that were very prevalent across this record that we were just excited by. And like, wow, this is a really cool thing. Let's put it on a lot of stuff.
Well, what I think is cool about that particular piece of gear, the Solina, is that there's a million sample libraries that aim to emulate with the most realistic detail.
Mm-hmm.
Orchestra, strings, horns, whatever.
Yeah.
And not that there's anything wrong with that. I think a couple of things, though, that are interesting is it's all really context dependent. And so if you think about, like, if you go see an orchestra in an orchestra hall, it's very different than recording right up close on an instrument, for example. And I think a lot in pop music, you're not recording something in a hall. You maybe have a quartet or something like that. You're going to close mic them in a smaller room, or even if it's a decent sized room, you're not necessarily miking it to get all that extra ambience. And so if you have a production, a song that, the guitar is kind of in your face, the drums are big, bass is rocking, all that stuff, vocal right here. And then you have this big, soupy string sound. In order for you to get that up high enough in the mix to be heard, it starts to wash everything out. It makes everything feel flubby. And so it ends up just not being the right mix of context oftentimes. And if you were to have that sound on its own, you go, oh, this sounds like, a sound stage where they'd record a movie, or it sounds like I'm in, a great concert hall or theater. But you kind of quickly find when you start using those sounds, it doesn't always work that way. Like even though it sounds really cool, it doesn't work in the context of a more modern production or something like that. And so then what's interesting is that there are also like there are things that sound hyper realistic, and then there are things that don't sound as realistic, but they still sound good.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say the Solina doesn't really sound, I mean, it sounds like strings, but it's like, it's not
Right.
the most realistic version of that sound, but there's something about it that makes it stand out. And I think
Yeah.
you kind of want to be on one end or the other. You don't want something that sounds pretty close, because then it's not interesting.
Yeah.
You know, and so sometimes getting something that sounds a little less realistic actually ends up becoming more of a character piece and has a better vibe for what it is that you're trying to do. And that's something that I don't often think about, because I get pretty fixated with how do I achieve a really realistic sound, whether that's, you know, the axe effects and trying to get something that sounds maybe like an amp in a room, or trying to recreate a favorite tone, or whatever it might be, a drum sound, anything like that, and really craving that sort of realism. But sometimes getting less realistic is an advantage.
Yeah.
And so it's about just paying close attention to what you're hearing, and then making a decision, uh, not getting too caught up in your preconceived notion of maybe what you think you want to get something to sound like.
Yeah. I think, I don't know. I've always kind of been chasing sounds for as long as I have. And you know how you'll get, and I'm sure everyone does this, especially in the software synth world too. Like you're just going preset after preset after preset after preset.
It's exhausting.
And it is exhausting. So when you feel like you've discovered one, you sort of stop and go, oh wait, it's almost, I don't know what it is, but it's something in my brain that's like, this might be an idea. Let me pause here for a minute and just explore the sound a little bit more. And sometimes I'll do that and go, well, it's not really cutting the thing that I want it to do, or it's not really maybe achieving the thing that I was hoping it would. But the sound itself is interesting. So maybe I'll come back
Mhm.
to it. So I'll hard it or favorite it or whatever, or create a preset for it in an actual synth. Sometimes I'll tweak a little things. I don't do a ton of that. I do a little bit when I feel like it's necessary. Like maybe I want to bring the resonance up on something, or presence of something, or the attack of a sound. And I'll change a little things here and there. But honestly, I just look for good sounds, because there's so many people out there that have spent their career building really unique sounds for any and everything. But the process of doing that, you really have to be in the mood to do it. And oftentimes it can't be on a day in which you're really thinking you're going to write, because just in the
Yeah.
long process of trying
Yeah.
to dial that in, it takes a while. Something else I was going to ask you, because you mentioned on the first record, it was isolation cabinets and miking a cabinet in the garage, but we were using all real stuff. I say
Yeah.
real, but you know what I mean, like more analog type things. Um,
Yeah. A
but on this,
traditional setup as opposed to like a digital
yeah,
kind of thing.
in the EP stuff, when we were going a little more metal than we've gone in the past, we started switching over a little bit. And I think by this record, if I'm not mistaken, we're fully into using fractal for you in the
Yeah.
guitar world. So, can you talk a little bit about that shift, like what that was like for you in finding tones that were appropriate to still evoke what we're trying to get to, which is still very much like an analog aesthetic,
Yeah.
but we're using a lot of things that are a little bit more convenient, because we can't go and buy 5 different amps to plug in. We need
Yeah.
one thing that could sort of emulate a lot of that. And so talk a little bit about what that process was like for you in the discovery, maybe in tones through the fractal, the axe.
Well, I'm trying to remember when we got that thing. But it's been quite a while now. And
2022, maybe 2021, 2022.
that sounds about right. So we'll say, 3 years, maybe 3 or 4 years, something like that. I played it a lot. It does so many amazing things. Um, but it's been, for me anyway, it's been really hard to really get to the level of familiarity that I've needed to get with it. And ironically, I was talking to you about this the other day, is I feel like now that we wrapped up the record, I feel like I have the Midas touch all of a sudden, and I'm finally able to
Yeah.
really, really get it to do exactly what I want it to do. Because it's like any bit of amazing tech these days is that uh the breadth of capabilities and the depth of detail that they go into to make these things is so incredible, and it's
Mm-hmm.
what makes them really good.
Mm-hmm.
But the downside of that is that the learning curve is astounding, and
Yes.
and not just the learning curve, but also you have to spend a lot of time with it to really develop your taste.
Mm-hmm.
Like my first experience using digital modeling was whenever the Line 6 Pod X3 came
Yeah.
out. I had
Yeah.
one of those, and I really liked that thing. It was so convenient. I toured it all over the place. But it was kind of like a toy compared
Mm.
to like the Fractal
The
now,
fractal, yeah.
or some of the other things that are out there. I haven't used all of those products, and frankly, I don't have the time to try to learn a whole other platform just for fun. But I remember getting the Fractal and thinking, okay, this is going to be good. I kind of know what these things are about.
Mm-hmm.
It gives more flexibility, and that's that. And then you get in there and you look at the list of just even cabinets, and you're like, there's literally like thousands of these things.
Mm-hmm. All different eras, different times, different configurations,
Different
just
miking combinations, different
endless.
speakers,
Yeah.
different, manufacturers, different. I mean, and so you're going through and you're going, man, I could spend months just clicking through
Mm-hmm.
cabinets,
Mm-hmm.
let alone amps, let alone the deeper settings on those amps. So all that's to say that what I think has been helpful for me has been there isn't really a substitute for putting in time exploring it, and trying to just build your taste so that you really understand. Because what I would do a lot is, like, I would build a preset and I would think, this is really cool, I like this, and it would be really cool and I would like
Mm-hmm.
it. But then you kind of quickly realize, like, oh, okay, well, maybe in the context of this song or this other song, this doesn't work as well. Maybe it cuts too hard, or it's flubbier than I thought it was going to be, or maybe the mid range of that particular amp just isn't quite right. Um, like, I have this weird way in my head of describing amp mid ranges now, and I'm not even going to share it because I don't think it would make sense to anybody. But there's a certain kind of like mid range that I've learned that I really like in an amp, and so, but it's taken a long time to get there, and it's been doing, had I don't even know how many different demos of a lot of these songs and how many
Yeah.
different guitar tones have been on a lot of these things. So this is a long-winded way of saying that the process of using that equipment, I mean, it's incredible because the results are great, and I'm happy with what we ended up with. I basically, what we used on most of the record for the like main rhythm guitar tone is a combo of a Marshall like JTM 45 style amp with a dual rectifier, which
Mm-hmm.
is a pretty classic combination. So the dual rectifier is set really scooped, and then the Marshall has more of the natural kind of mid range in it. And then just blending those to taste. The blend changes a little bit, song to song, but in general, the Marshall is set kind of as like the main level of tone, and then you just kind of slide up the dual rectifier until it kind of fills out and gives it a little bit more modern. I say modern, not as if that is a really like hip modern amp, but more.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been around.
It's been around
since
for a long time.
The 90s.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean, right? It just gives it a little bit more of a distinct kind of quality where it's not just one sound. And one thing that really helps also that I would recommend that people do, even if you're probably doing demos, but recording your DI signal with whatever amp you use, because they make it so easy to reamp things. And so if you get into the process and you realize, oh, this amp sound really isn't working for me, or you find something better that really excites you, like maybe you found something good and you're like, okay, like in the interest of time, we need to work on this, but then you find something that just blows you away. You can just reamp it. It takes as long as it takes to just play through the song. And so that's really great. So that's like, I would go through and record everything with the Marshall. And then when everything was tracked and I was happy with the takes, I would just run the DIs back through, and it's the equivalent kind of having split, if you're in a studio,
right.
You would maybe split your signal, and they go to two different amps in two different rooms, and you record them at the same time. So it's not quite as efficient as that. And you could set up the Fractal to do two amps at once, but based on processing power and getting it all right, you don't feel quite as like you need to get it right in the preset. You can kind of tweak things if you need to get the
it's more about the
way.
Performance and the articulation of the performance, but knowing that you still have the freedom to be able to go explore post the recording, to be able to go, ooh,
definitely,
maybe this isn't what, or I want to tweak that amp a little bit more, and you're not completely locked in. I think some of that is really the beauty of the digital space that we're in. And I think being able to embrace it. Look, I don't think you're going to, I love analog, don't get me wrong at all. But I know, I think this really, the umbrella of this and what we're talking about is we're doing all of it. So from the engineering, producing, the recording, all of those things, we're really taking all of that on. So when you really unpack what that means, you're musicians, of course, and you're creative and you love to be in that creative space, but you also have to be really skilled in the exploration of your software and things that you're using. And that's a journey in and of itself. And so you have to, I mean, I think we're both gone to school for master's degree in YouTube,
you have to learn your gear.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to, probably anybody, but I think especially if you're in a situation where you don't have an engineer.
Yeah, we can't afford to pay one. Yeah.
Yeah, like, well, and the time invested as well. It's like, I don't know anybody who would want to spend the amount of hours working on this, as us, even if they're getting paid. But
that's true.
No, but I think it's really, really important to learn how the stuff works and really like take it too far and have to reel it back in and all of that, and really listen critically. It develops your ear a lot to be able to understand, is this enough gain? Is it too much gain? Like, am I losing the chords because it's compressing too hard, or does it not have that, I don't know, the quality it needs to have because maybe it needs a little more compression in the amp, or, whatever that might be. Being able to even tweak it song to song a little bit and not just go, I have this one preset, I'm going to use exactly this every time. Being able to use the, even the, I guess what I want to say is there are really important lessons to learn working in a more analog fashion and working in a more digital fashion. And so trying to marry those things together, really knowing the gear so that you can get the right sound, but then being willing to commit to sounds, being willing to print stuff and just say, that's what it is. and not being too worried about going through a billion presets. It's like being able to trust yourself. Because I think when you're exploring what the sound of a new record is going to be, you spend a lot of time exploring, as you should, because you're trying to figure out, like, what are the bones of this thing going to be like? There's so many options available, and that is kind of one of the problems of working in an all digital world, is that the preset list does not get smaller. It grows and grows and grows and grows. And so you can spend all of your time just clicking through, and eventually you lose context. You lose the ability to really even understand, like, what you're hearing anymore.
Yeah, like what was the difference between preset 139 and 202?
Yeah, and 634, and you're going, I don't know. I mean, they're all good sounds, you know? And so it requires being able to really understand what it is that you want to go for. And then very quickly being able to, I think another thing that probably would help people is not trying to find your sounds isolated. So like if you have drums and you have guitars and you're trying to find a keyboard sound, well, probably don't just listen to keyboards on their own, right? Because you're not getting a sense of whether it's going to cut through in the right way or blend in the right way, or whether the frequencies are going to complement each other, or whether they're going to double up too much with what's already there. So trying to do those things as a whole, I think, is really important, because your ear will very quickly tell you if it works or not. Like if you're playing it and it's turned up and you can't even hear the keyboard, it's not the right sound.
It's not the right sound.
It's not that it needs to be turned up more.
Yeah.
It's that it's not blending and cutting through with what's there. It's just completely getting washed out. So it's the wrong sound, even if you love that sound on its own. So it means one of two things. You need a different sound, or every other sound has to change to accommodate that keyboard sound. So maybe if it's a keyboard forward song, then maybe that's what you choose to do. And that's where you have to make decisions about what things are going to sound like. But those are a couple of kind of boneheaded, obvious things that I feel like the best of us can get caught up in forgetting when you're in the heat of battle and you're going through a list of 1,000 presets or whatever.
Yeah. I think there was a lot of, I'm trying to think, when I mentioned earlier about utility sounds, you're going to be looking for something that's just a really great amp that really evokes sounds that you've enjoyed from other artists, other bands, and you're looking for that and going, what about this is my identity, and being able to sort of find your identity or a thing that's really works for you for a majority of the things we do. And of course there's like tricks of the trade to punch up something in a guitar, make it sound unique for a certain part or certain thing. But ultimately what we're talking about is like, you need some meat and potatoes.
Core sound.
Yeah.
And a big part of that decision too is how vintage or how modern you're going to want it to sound.
Yeah, and it's interesting because
really
we kind of go back and forth.
Yeah, we're torn because we really love classic music. As a lot of people do. We really love classic music, and there are so many great guitar sounds. And I think you and I speak this way a lot, and probably most musicians do, where our head is like this index of all these great sounds from all these different artists. And so you go, oh, what if we did that? That could sound like AC/DC. Or what if we had this Black Album drum sound? Or what if we had this Pyromania guitar tone? Or we stack vocals like, the Eagles or whatever, right?
Right.
So you sort of have all of these reference points to be able to communicate to the other person what your idea sort of is. But then when it comes down to execution, you have to decide, are you really going to chase replicating that thing? Or are you going to figure out your own version of it and how do you ultimately want it to come across? So you might record your song in a demo and then go, okay, this sounds too old school, which it's a cool sound, but maybe it doesn't really sound like us.
Right. Right.
And so from a guitar standpoint, I don't know if that resonates with you on a keyboard.
It does. Well, you
but
mentioned something that's really interesting, and I will say, some things I think about our sounds we obviously want to keep secret and just for the mystique of what we're trying to craft and build. But other things I think were very obvious and okay to share. Pyromania brought up a really interesting thing. I don't think a lot of people really think about the fact that there's synthesizer across that entire record. Because you hear it and it's so iconic with the guitars and things that are on that record.
vocals,
And of course, and vocals and Mutt Lange producing and all of this incredible work. But if you go back and listen to that record, and especially if you're in headphones, on a good set of headphones, you're going to hear this really lovely synth bass sounds and things in there that I mentioned are like utility sounds, excuse me, that really help to punch up the whole overall sound quality of that record. You listen to that record now, 40 years later, it still punches. It still sounds great. So I was chasing that kind of thing. A lot of times in rock songs, I don't want the synth to be forward. I really want it just to accentuate the guitars. But you got to find the frequency range of where the guitars maybe aren't cutting and finding that space, at least in the EQ of it all, to go, okay, the guitars, maybe they're sitting in the mids here. I want the synth maybe to sit somewhere over here in the low ends or maybe in the high end, like we talked about with Solina. So you get a nice spectrum of sound across, or a wall of sound, if you will.
Yeah.
And it really helps to push and make something sound really big. So a lot of those classic records that I talk with, Foreigner, that's another one. I go back to the first record when we did the song Heartbreaker. The bridge feels like the first time. Like,
yeah.
Hand on the heart. I was literally chasing the synth sound for that song. And I was like, I want Foreigner in the bridge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I'm looking for something that felt like that kind of bridge, and stumbled across it in a Dave Smith Prophet that I have, and thought, this is great. This evokes that kind of feeling to me. And oftentimes that's what I'm looking for. If it's going to be something in a bridge or in a section where you're going to feature it, I do go and listen and think about, what kind of mood is this song? What does it evoke for me? What are we trying to get to? And I'll go and look for those unique sounds. But pianos,
or what might be an interesting spice to add into the mix.
That's it. It's like you're building a chili, so you want to maybe put your own little bam bam in there, to make it yours. But it's still
cayenne.
It's still coming back and to those core things. Like, pianos need to be able to find a way to get through in a mix. And sometimes I often grapple with this. I love like upright sounds for pianos.
I'm glad you're bringing this up.
Yeah.
Because we're getting into some of our specific tastes, which we're developing more of as we go.
Yeah. So a darker upright sound for me in a piano is my favorite. When I'm writing, I love that sound because I find it to be a very singular mood for me. I'm in the room by myself with an old upright, and I'm playing in that space. That's kind of the headspace that I get into.
Cloudy, murky sort of quality that comes with, especially the mid-range on a piano like that.
Yeah.
It doesn't have the clarity and the distinct
of a baby grand or a full grand piano.
Yeah.
So a lot of times my instincts are to go to that. Well, guess what? When you're trying to put that into a rock song, it doesn't cut through. So your instincts are going, shoot, this was such a great writing tool, and I loved it so much. But now that we got to go and record it for real, post demo, it's just not cutting it. So I had to go back and get used to things which are much brighter in the piano space that is not my taste, like pop grands or, these big grand pianos that have a little bit more clarity.
Bright, spanky, clear kind of sounds.
Yeah. And I would never in 1,000 years go chase that if I was looking to write. I'm always going to go with an upright sound. I want something that sounds like you bought that piano and it's not quite in tune, but it's good enough. Like, because
Yeah.
it was kind of what I grew up with. I didn't have
In your living
expensive
room.
piano. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
it. Like an
totally.
old church
Totally.
piano.
Yes. Yeah.
Those things that have dust all over it, and you're just like, I just found this relic, but it's
Couple
something's kind
broken
of
keys for some
up in the
reason.
top
Yeah.
register. Yeah, for whatever
Yeah.
reason they don't work.
Yeah, there's always
Strings
a bass
are
note
old.
that doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah. The sort of clankiness of the pedal, and when you're hitting those things, those are all things that I really love. But like I said,
they
when
need
you're
to emulate the creak that you get on those old piano benches. You know, like my piano growing up had one of the piano benches that flipped up, and you'd have like your music
all your
books and stuff
your
in there.
sheet music. Yeah, I have one of those.
But those wooden legs, it's like
you
sit down and you're playing, and it's just
it's the whole thing's
every
gonna
time
collapse.
you move. Yeah.
Yes. But all of that stuff is to say that it's like sometimes sounds that you find that you love that really help create the genesis for the song that you're writing don't end up working when it comes to production and the actual recording of the song that you're going to put out. So I had to get comfortable in that space, just as you mentioned earlier. Sometimes you found the greatest thing in the world and you're like, no, that's the sound, man. That's the sound. It's like, it can't be the sound if we're going to add all this other instrumentation, because it just doesn't cut through. You're not going to hear it. It's not going to even matter in the spectrum at all. It just gets buried underneath the bass, underneath the lower frequencies that are kind of in that space with it. So,
well, that's really true. And, you know, that makes me think of something else as well. Like when comparing this record, the new record, with the last one we did, you know, we talked about how we try to do it as analog as possible and as, you know, quote unquote real as possible. But one of the other things is that, and I kind of forget about this, but there was a battle within us to try to pull back as much as we could to not overdub too many things.
Yes.
Because we wanted it to sound as close to, you know, four guys, you know, drums, bass, keys, guitar, vocal.
Right.
In a room playing those parts, right? It's like, yeah, there are multiple guitar parts on those songs. And that was kind of a battle for me of going, I think it makes the song better, but also,
how are we going to do this? How does it translate? Yeah.
Yeah. And we play live, we're going to have to pick and choose and sort of rearrange these things a little bit. So let's try to keep it as close to just what it's going to be. That mentality changed a lot on this, where it was more about, okay, what if we just completely abandon that rule and we just try to do anything and everything that we feel like makes this song better? And so one of the production tricks that this is used a lot, so they don't get sole credit, but another band that we really love that uses this particular trick I'm going to talk about is Ghost. So we're huge fans of Ghost.
Mm-hmm.
If you haven't listened to Ghost, I don't know where you've been hiding, what rock you've been hiding under, but go listen to Ghost. They're amazing.
I mean, they've just been around for 20 years. Even though it doesn't feel like that at all, but they have been around.
They still
for
feel like a newer band, but they're not at all.
Right.
But Ghost, you know, they do something pretty commonly with their production where if they have and I don't know which part gets written first. I assume the guitar parts get written first, because I know Tobias plays guitar. Maybe he plays keys as well, but let's just say that there's an important motif in the song, and you really want that motif to shine through. In a big, dense production where there's lots of things happening, if you have only, it's kind of like the old school thing of doubling a vocal.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like if you take a vocal and it's just one vocal, it might kind of not stand up that well against, you know, a couple of amps and all the stuff that's happening in the production. Even though live it would sound great, in the context of trying to get everything to sound bigger and bolder and, you know, more awesome, that vocal might sound a little thin on its own, even if it's recorded well. And so you might double it or triple it or whatever, stack harmonies that help it sort of stand up against the big sounds that it has to stand up against. And so if you have a musical motif, doubling it with other instruments is a really great way to go about that. Miss You by the Stones is another good example of this. I think that song is genius for a number of reasons, but one is because that motif, that basically every time you hear that roll around throughout that song, it is a different instrument or a different combination of instruments playing that same motif. And so an example that comes to mind, because it's like the only keyboard thing I get to take credit for on this record, is there's a song called The Wheel. And I had written the main rhythm guitar parts way before this, but when we were recording the tracks for real, I felt like it kind of needed an extra guitar thing. And so I wrote this kind of what I thought was kind of a cool line over the chorus, but it didn't quite poke out enough. It needed to sound thicker, but it's played on one string. And yeah, I could have recorded it a few different times, but I was like, I feel like this would be something that, and this is what Ghost does a lot, is they'll double a guitar line or a motif with a keyboard. So I went and I found a cool DX7 sort of patch and went and like transcribed the guitar part onto keyboard and then blended that together with the guitar. And now you have something that doesn't quite sound like a keyboard. It doesn't quite sound like a guitar. It just sounds like this cool line that's happening through that chorus. And so playing with that as well, like trying to understand, okay, we have these parts, guitar and keys, they overlap so much. And so depending on the song and what one is doing, you may need to either do a complementary part to fill out that space that way. Or if a piece is a really important piece to the song, what you might actually need to do is double that, and, both players play that same thing. And that's hard sometimes when you're used to one or the other, is to recognize when you need to switch to that other style of recording, if that makes sense.
I'm smiling about this. This is going to date me a bit, but when I first started wanting to play keyboards, like in a rock band, and I've talked to you about this, but for our listeners, I've always fashioned myself, as I know, and I'm very proud in being in the skin of being a keyboard player. That's my main instrument. But there are moments and times where you feel like, okay, that's not, in the era of hair band music and all that, keyboards were just not prevalent. It just looked a little cheeseball, believe it or not, to see. So I was like, I'm not a great guitar player. I can play guitar, I can play bass, but these were things that I was kind of struggling with. Well, hearing when I first heard Yngwie Malmsteen's
Alcatraz.
And Alcatraz, post Alcatraz, probably Rising Force era.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I think it was a Johansson. I can't think of his first name, but he was one of the synth players, the keyboard players there. Also, classically, he sounded like he had classical chops, but a lot of those licks that Yngwie would play would be doubled by the synth player.
Yeah.
And so I would try to learn all that stuff, like, like all this crazy classical kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I would be so excited that I was like, cool, I could kind of play a guitar lick like that, a solo.
Yeah.
And play along with him. And that, of course, was when my chops were really great. But all of those kind of things still carry with me. And Ghost does this a lot. Of course, we covered Square Hammer. If anyone's looking for an example of what we're talking about, go listen to the cover of that song or the original one. Yeah. But you're hearing that both in the keyboard and the guitars, the main motif of that. You hear it done quite a bit. A lot of bands do it, even bands that you wouldn't even think of. But Sonic Youth is another one where you hear a vocal line match with the guitar, and the melody of what the guitar's playing matches their vocals. And that's been a signature thing for Sonic Youth to do in their music for a long time. Not to kind of take away the magic of it. It's not. It's just a unique way that they recorded stuff that really helped punctuate things in the song. So I love that you brought that up, because it is something kind of signature for us that we really explored here. War on Drugs, going back to them, That's another one where they hammer a motif, um,
Yes. Yeah.
with guitar and keyboard a lot to really sell the poetry or
Yeah.
the thing, the aesthetic of what they're trying to get across.
Well, it's like if you've got a melody line that's really great, then you should milk it for all it's
Mhm,
worth, and sometimes those things feel so much more impactful when, as a collective, you're all rallied behind this one beautiful thing. It's like sometimes you got to create the bed for that motif to
mhm,
happen, and other times you have to lean harder on the motif. There's just no getting around that, like, everyone being sold out on one musical idea.
mhm.
Sometimes that is the most powerful thing that you can do, and, like, gives you the, hair on the arms, sticking up kinda feeling.
The, we both saw Coldplay many years ago, and one of the biggest song I don't know if this was a translator for you too, but the song Charlie Brown is another song that has this like dun 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 dun. That whole thing,
Yeah,
it's the whole band
yeah,
kind of doing that motif together, and it's so even now I get it's such a
yeah,
cathartic feeling to
yeah,
remember that space. But
yeah,
those are moments where it's like, man, they're obviously that band is pushing to the rafters with a lot of
yeah,
their music, but that song in particular, not one that you would imagine me talking about in their discography, but definitely one that does that very well. Um, and it
yeah.
just creates this really joyous moment. Um, and it certainly helps for the thing to stick,
It's like a
subconsciously.
choir,
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
there's a
Yeah.
different feeling for one person singing a melody if it's really great. That's gonna be important, there's a place for that. So maybe you have, like, the solo vocalist, and then the choir comes in behind, really reinforcing that, and it's hard not to feel an energy from that, and so it's the same concept applied to really any combination of elements that you want. We happen to use on this record quite a bit of guitar and keys doing that, but there are times where, um, like there's a guitar doing a vocal melody or,
Mhm.
any of those other combinations. I think that's if you're an artist and you're trying to, you're going, man, anything that maybe this is a good way to think about it. Because sometimes when we're writing, we're going, man, I don't know what to play because it feels like anything else, like it doesn't sound like this needs anything because I don't know, it already sounds good. And I don't want to take away from what's in there. That might be a clue that maybe what you need to do is just use your instrument to reinforce what's already there. So it might be like, okay, well, maybe I need to reinforce the vocal
Mhm.
or the guitar part or, whatever, the bass line. The bass line's another one is that we started doing, you've alluded to this already, but on our first record, we picked up a trick that we've been using ever since, which is just to use a synth bass uh, to mimic, I get, well, mimic's not the right word, but just double, I suppose,
Mhm.
what the bass guitar is doing,
Yeah. So it covers
just to
both
give
low
it.
end, but also pulls into the low mid frequencies a little bit with some of the sawtoothiness of the bass.
Yeah, you get more
Yeah.
brightness in a
Yeah.
synth usually than what you're going to get in a traditional bass sound. They sustain differently. So, as much as we might compress a bass guitar down to where it sustains pretty evenly, you have that initial plunk and it's going to slowly be dying off. Whereas a synth is just going to be, especially like a sawtooth sound, is it just goes infinitely at the same sort of, level of impact. But also something about, a bass guitar is going to be recorded in mono most of the time, or at least we do. But, your synth sound probably has some kind of modulation on it. And so it probably goes more out here. So you end up creating this sound where bass is right here and it's holding most of your foundation. But then you have this kind of even thing that balances out with it that goes more left and right. And so you create this sort of sound field with the bass that is much stronger than either one of those on their own, you
Mhm.
know?
That was trial and error for us too, like really figuring out like a lot of these things that we're talking about now, it feels like we've gotten a degree in it, and I promise you, neither one of us have. It's YouTube
No.
University and a lot of research, but also a lot of trial and error. Like,
Yeah.
we didn't know the synth thing was
Experimentation.
gonna work until we did it, and we're like, "Damn, that sounds really great in
Yeah.
the mix. We have to do that." And then we go to
Yeah.
write another song, and we go, "Oh, what was that thing we did with the bass? Oh, it was a synth bass. Okay, cool. Let me go get that
Yeah.
sound again." And it just ended up being a thing that really worked well for us to really punch up that part of the stereo field, in a really great way, we think, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And all those little things, as you not everything that you come up with is going to always work, but you are going to start to pick up things, I think, that you use often enough that they start to become just like parts of your vocabulary. I think any artist is trying to go through a period of trying to figure out like what's my thing or who am I or what do we sound like or what do we sound like in this context versus another context. What's our palette that we're gonna paint from? And I think the more experimentation you do, the more you start to pick up those things that find themselves showing up more frequently. Like when I think about Foo Fighters, I think about double vocals.
Yes.
That's something that Dave Grohl does so well. Or if I think about, we talked about Def Leppard, I'm thinking about those stacked vocals,
Wow.
as
Yeah.
being, an obvious thing. If I think about
Iconic for
like
them.
Guns N' Roses, I'm thinking about how those left and right guitars really play off each other in such a great
Yes.
way. They're never really playing the same thing. AC/DC too, but AC/DC, I don't think of it quite as much. And maybe because the music is a little simpler.
Yeah.
Um,
Also,
but
in the go
just
that GNR thing talking about the Izzy and Slash sort of thing, but also the semi hollow body to Les
yeah,
Paul and sort
yep,
of the differences in those guitars and how they really informed their sound in a way, you know,
yeah,
and also
yeah. And
trying to
those
replicate
things,
some of that too.
yeah. I mean, those things start to become parts of the DNA of that particular artist. You know, and it's like AC/DC. I wouldn't want to hear keyboards in that band,
No, I
right? But
wouldn't. I would just wouldn't.
Van Halen, well,
Who knew that we needed it?
you know what, you know
Who knew
what,
that
it
we
turned
needed
out
it?
to be really great. It
That's
turned
it.
out to be great, and so and that's all just to say, try everything. And maybe that's partly why this record took 6 years to make. It
Yes.
shouldn't have, by the way. It
We
shouldn't
didn't
have.
even talk about
But
the crafting of the drums for this
yeah,
too, but
well, let's talk
just
about that for a minute.
to punctuate on that for a minute, you know, we had some help in that space again, and um, a very dear person to both of us, really did help us in that space to really get some drums and get the ideas across. But as I mentioned before,
Yeah, Michael, who had recorded the first album with us, most of the songs on that, recorded most of the songs on this new one as well.
yeah. And what's been interesting for us, and we kind of alluded to this a little bit, so I'll share the short story about that. But I've always wanted to play drums since I was a kid, and no surprise with playing percussive instruments like piano and organ and synth and all that kind of stuff that I would be attracted to drums. So it's always been something I've loved. And while I'm not a great drummer in the way that I would fashion a great drummer, I can play enough to get an idea across. And throughout the last 10 years of us doing music together, yes, it's definitely helped. You said it in the last podcast. It's amazing what 6 years will do for you as a drummer or as
Yeah,
any musician, really. If you're still playing your instrument 6 years, you're gonna learn and grow and be a little bit better and more efficient in that space. But each and every
a little
time, like,
more
we would
endurance.
yeah, oh, definitely more endurance for sure. I might make a verse with some of the
Yeah,
stuff we would do, and they're like, "Oh god, I'm gassed." But so getting better endurance and all that space, but there's also a thing, like, I might not be what I would classify myself as a drummer in the same way that we're talking about our friend Michael. However, I do feel like I have an understanding of what I'm looking for in a drum sound. And this has been a long, sometimes painful process for us to really get sounds that we feel like both sound like a real drum sound, knowing that we use MIDI drum kits to be able. So you're still playing drums, but we're same as the Axe or same as some of the software synths. We're still trying to make it work in a space where it's a little bit harder in a garage to go and record live drums when you're with neighbors who may not appreciate that at 12 o'clock at night. So there's been a big thing about figuring out, you know, hi-hats and do they sound as natural as the real thing, and the transient properties of snares and toms, and do they punctuate in the song the same way? So it's been a long process to get there. Um, it's one that I enjoy somewhat, but oftentimes we'll go back and hear it, and I'm like, man, it just doesn't sound as good as the drums we hear on X record. And we
Yeah.
really tried for the better part of this whole time to keep looking for those things. And we've tried different, preset packs or whatever. Initially, we did not use Superior, but we did relent on this record and go and use Superior Drummer, which again is very similar to the Axe. It's infinitum on how much you can explore in that space, mic changes, all the different sounds, snares, all this different stuff to kind of craft a thing that sounds
It's
good.
deep. Yeah, it's
It's
deep.
deep.
Yeah,
It's
I
very
mean,
deep.
we it's important to me too that, like, it's funny now that I'm thinking about it, because I wouldn't feel this way about a keyboard, right? Like, you would, if you went and bought a specific, like, classic keyboard, let's say, you're doing it for the sounds that are built in those presets, right? Like, oh, this does a thing that's really cool.
Mhm.
But when it comes to, like, guitar or like drums and something like Superior, I think because they're such popular instruments and they're such a predominant part of our band,
Mhm.
it's important to me that I'm using something that feels somewhat unique, right? Like, I'm sure there are a million bands who have put out a million records with the same preset sound in Superior
Mhm.
Drummer, right?
Mhm.
It's like, and not that there's anything wrong with that. I'm not trying to throw shade at anybody. It's just, you want to create this feeling that your tastes are imprinted on everything that you're doing, and that you're not just like grabbing the first thing you have access to and using that. And so it's not using a default preset in Fractal,
Mhm.
or not using, the first good rock sounding preset in Superior Drummer, and trying to marry together a few different influences across, trying to make everybody who's got a say in the final production happy.
Mhm.
Since I do more of the engineering, it's also me trying to interpret what it is that you're hearing. You might send me a reference and I might hear it one way, and there's a quality of it that you're hearing a different way. And so, there's that too, is everything's got to get sort of funneled through all these different perspectives to
Yes.
try to get to something that makes sense for everybody.
Yeah.
Um, but so yeah, we spent a lot of time building drum presets and trying
Mhm.
different snares and kicks and amounts of room sound or amounts of compression, or how natural does it sound versus how processed does it sound, all of those things. How much like parallel compression is something that I like a lot. If you want a
Mhm.
really explosive sounding drum sound, you're going to need a decent amount of that, trying to make sure that the snare drum doesn't get lost in the chorus. Maybe it
Yep.
all sounds great in the verse, and then everything
Yeah.
kicks up a notch and you're going, oh
Wait.
man, I'm kind of losing it.
Yeah.
All of those things being considerations. And so I built lot of different kits over the course of the last couple of years, and even really more recently in the recording of this. And it was kind of there at the very end that we sort of settled on, there's probably 3 unique kits. They all share
similar qualities. Yeah.
But I think it's 3 different kits. Most songs use one kit. I think Take the Flame has its own kit. Toxic Heroes has its own thing going on. And then most of the other songs are kind of using more or less the same kit. And then, of course, just a different amount of ambience or blends on, snare reverb and that sort of thing kind of changes to fit the song. But at least the core sounds are the same.
Yeah. It gives a chance for like,
Away from Us, that has its own sound.
It's its own sound. But we've done some really interesting things with program drums or drum machine type sounds for certain things that we want to feel that way, that feels very metronomically precise, or it has its own thing. It's a really nice sub bass sound, or an 808 or a shaker or something might have its own sort of affected thing. But the drum space, especially in the hi-hat, especially in the snare, for me, those are big things that were like, God, it doesn't. Brendan O'Brien, we could talk about for days, but that was something I would tell you that from his style of engineering and production on a lot of the records that I love, those drums sound great. Steve Albini, also RIP, but also an incredible drum sounds that he would get on his records. And those are things that were really influential to me. And at least from a production standpoint, regardless of who played the drums, it was definitely important.
The opposite, though, because also I know another one that you really love is Royal Blood.
Oh, Royal Blood, yeah, it seemed like highly compressed, or even Nine Inch Nails, highly compressed drums.
A lot of compression, but also chunkier sounds.
Mm-hmm.
Like Brendan O'Brien uses that high-pitched piccolo snare a lot.
Yeah, piccolo snare.
Which cuts through.
Yeah.
Like that's a very legitimate solution to a problem of a snare drum getting lost in a rock band context. But then, you kind of have to ask yourself, well, is that the sound that I want though? Like, do you want that sound or not?
Right.
We didn't go that direction. We went chunkier snare for the most part.
Yes. Yeah. Not full Saint Anger though. We didn't get to quite to the Saint Anger
snare. Yeah. Not clanky, crazy ringing overtones, but yeah, like just deeper, thicker sounding drums, drums that hit you in the chest a little bit more.
Yeah. And it definitely cut through. Like, I know, like I said, we hadn't talked at all about the drum and sort of the journey of that, but I think it's an important piece because it was very similar to guitar and the synth and the bass. We were on an explorative journey to get something that really worked for us and really worked out well in the sounds. And it's been a process, like from the first record through the EP stuff to now. They have changed and evolved, but I do feel the best about the drums that I felt, knowing that. And again, we have an acoustic kit. We could go through the process of miking it and doing it right and doing the acoustic thing. But the freedom of being able to kind of really have different snares, different toms, different things that you could swap out, which is what a studio would do if you were recording in some cases, depending on the song and the need, has really allowed us to be a little bit more, explore a little bit more of the territory that we can pull off with that as well. I think personally, to me, when everyone hears this record, they are some of my favorite parts of the album is some of the drum sounds that you got. They sound really great in the mixes. So I'm hoping that fans and people that listen to record will feel the same. I think they sound really good.
And credit to Michael. I mean, really, really great performances on these songs as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, the drums, I've always felt that, I'm sure I probably didn't come up with this, or at least I'm sure I didn't, but a way to think about like the drum sound creates the sense of the space that the recording happens in. So how much room there is, what that room sounds like in the drums really gives your ear and your brain the impression of where the whole band is playing. You don't really get that from the guitar or from the vocal or anything like that, especially in a close mic'd kind of modern context. You know, you might on some old classic records where things were a little more live and mics were backed up a little bit more. And so that getting all of that right really sets the tone for what the entire record is going to sound like. So yeah, credit where it's due on that for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I guess the only other thing we haven't really talked about, and maybe we roll this into performance and the next episode, but would be, you know, vocal production.
Vocals. Yeah.
And I don't really know what I would share on that from an actual production standpoint, because I mean, like the gear that we use is pretty straightforward, you know. Like I'm in a well-treated room here. This is where I tracked vocals on the record. There's a little bit of natural ambience, but it doesn't flutter or have any of those nasty sounds. So it sounds natural. It doesn't sound suffocated like, you know, you're in a box. But I recorded into, I have a modded Warm Audio WA-47, and it sounds really good, you know, so it's a large diaphragm tube condenser mic. That's what 99% of the album was recorded on. I also have their sort of Neve recreation that I recorded into. I have a couple of outboard compressors. They got used sometimes, but all of it was really gentle, normal things, because most of the real production happened, you know, I use Logic, but happened in the computer, in the DAW. And so the process of recording really had a lot more to do for me with just getting a good performance than it did getting the gear right. Whereas I think with the other instruments, you spend a lot of time focused on the gear itself. You know, is the guitar set up right? Is there the right amount of gain? Is the EQ set properly? You know, does it need this, that, or the other? And yeah, the performance matters, of course it does, but there's more elements in between your hands and the speakers with something like a guitar or even a keyboard. With the vocal, it's like, if it's not sounding pretty close to how you want it to sound just singing into the microphone, then you probably need to adjust how you're singing to make it all work. And so there was a lot of that for me.
Yeah. I think I love that too, because you can go down the rabbit hole, and we've certainly done that with a little bit of the stuff we talked about today. But in vocals, there's so many different mics, there's so many different things out there. But again, for anyone who's really looking to achieve even a little bit of what we're talking about, a computer with a DAW, some good software sounds, a modeler, if you really cannot go out and buy amps and all that stuff, and you're trying to do home recording, I think any one of the ranges of those would work
That's
to
the
get
way
started.
of the world now.
That's just how it is.
I don't think it's
a
going
MIDI drum
back.
kit. You know, they give you the freedom to really explore a lot of things that could really be great, and you don't have to have the top of the line stuff these days. If you're really just looking to capture a great performance, I think you can pull a lot of those things off in the digital space and do some really incredible stuff. Billie Eilish with Phineas sitting on their bed in a bedroom and writes, you know, a lot of their songs, and a lot of the record gets done from that space, and they sound incredible. And it's not like you had to go. Of course, they have the ability to go now to professional studios, but they didn't have to. And people still absorb that music for what it was.
If they did, it would be different.
It would be different. Right. Exactly. So there's
Vibe matters. Vibe totally matters.
I guess in the vein of right or wrong, to put a bow tie on it, what works for you, what sounds good to you, that's what really matters. The exploration is a fun process if you have the time to do it, and really looking for the things that are going to be utility sounds for the sound that you're going for. And the rest can be explorative, just as long as they serve the song and what you're trying to craft. And all those things, like we talked about, 10 years of writing together, we learned what fits in the stereo field of the Silver Echoes ethos of production. And so we use some of those tricks and things that we've learned, but this is still a very much in the infancy of our looking and exploring what we're trying to do. And the next thing we write, next thing we record and put out will not sound like what we just finished.
Mm-mm.
So
No.
we're already in that space of thinking about it. This record's done. We're getting it mastered. We're excited to get it out, and so everyone can hear it. And but who knows what the next journey is going to be? Maybe we'll write a dance record. Who knows? Wherever the road takes us.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely not going to say no.
Yes.
I think that'd be really cool. Or could be really cool.
We still haven't explored our organ metal. We talked about writing organ metal.
I almost sent you a video the other day because I found an old video of us playing some of that stuff back at your place.
Oh my gosh.
And it was such a blast from the past. I had completely forgotten about that until I saw that video. I need to find it again and send it to you because you'll get a kick out of it.
So I can see it. I want to see that for sure.
Because the other thing that I did the other day as I was procrastinating on something that was more important is I went through all of my voice memos.
Oh yeah.
Going back to, I think the oldest one that I had in there wasn't as old as I thought it would be, but was 2015, I think.
Oh yeah.
Somewhere around there.
That's about right.
So deleted a bunch of, duplicates and things that are no longer needed. But there's quite a few good new song ideas in there that I've completely forgotten about. And so that's something else that I'll probably be sending your way soon is like, hey, let's circle back to this, 10-year-old idea that is still a good idea that we just lost track of.
That's it. There's so many things. The best advice I give anybody, just keep writing the exploratory journeys that we've talked about in this podcast. They're up for you and your own journey. Take it and do with it what you wish, but just keep writing. And if it's a new sound that sparks an idea or putting new strings on your guitar and it made it sound better than it did before, all those things are great ways that you can just explore something and create, and don't be afraid of it. Just keep chasing it and going after it.
I love that. And I would only add an ironic statement from a band that took 6 years to put an album together, but that's finished projects, because once you've wrapped up something, it gives you the freedom to move on to something that is different.
That's right.
Try different things. And after a while, I shared this with you, I'm very ready. Well, it's done now, but I was very ready to finish this album. I need it out of my life. I need to not be thinking about this particular set of songs, this particular type of production. I love it. I think it's so great, but I'm ready to move on and do something different now.
Totally.
And so you give yourself that freedom by finishing things and putting it out and learning and just recognizing that by the time you get to the end of a project, you're always going to be better than you were when you started it, which puts you in a weird place.
Certainly wiser.
It's a really good thing because you're getting better. And the hard part about it, though, is that if you're a perfectionist like I am, is that you immediately go, well, I can't put this out now, because if I were to start over again today, it would be, 3 times better or whatever, arbitrary amount better. But finish things, put them out, move on to the next thing, and leverage what you gain from what you finish to, just make your future work better, and recognize it's all a moment in time,
Yes.
And ultimately what matters is the art. The production is important. It totally is. And nerds like us really get into that stuff and really focus on that stuff. Most people don't. They care if it's loud enough that they can hear it on their phone, that the vocal is clear, that there's a cool element to it that sticks in their brain. That's about it for most people.
Yeah. But you can go and I think thousands of punk records that didn't use any of what we're talking about today that sound absolutely fantastic for what they were. in what they are. I'm still going to play Iggy and the Stooges every day
Yeah.
because it sounds awesome. And it
Yeah.
didn't sound, I mean, if you're talking about production, it's not got all the bells and whistles of stuff right now, but the raw power of it is what stands out. So yeah, make art.
I'll give you a fun, and we can sign off after this, but I'll give you a fun little experiment to run if you're feeling bad about your production capabilities or you feel stuck in a rut or anything like that, is go pull up a bunch of your favorite songs from when you were like in high school or middle school or whenever, like when you were younger, before you got super into like being a musician or recording or any of that, and pull those things up and play a bunch of them and really ask yourself, does it sound as good as you remember it sounding?
Yeah.
Some of those things, yes, will stand up.
Yep.
But a lot of them won't. And you'll be surprised sometimes, especially if you haven't heard something in a while. You know, maybe you have a good fond memory of this album or this other thing. You'll play it back and go, man, this sounds like not good at all, actually. This is not how it holds up in my mind.
Yeah.
But you're going, I love the song. And so that's what stuck with you, is that the song really made a mark that it needed to make. And so the production was secondary, you know?
Yeah. And it didn't make a difference because they got what they, they got out what they needed to say, and that was that. And it didn't have to be anything that was crazy. So
totally.
Go explore, make art. We hope you enjoyed this a little bit. We know we nerded out a lot, but that's who we are. So yeah. Have fun.
Yeah. If you made it this far, thank you for listening. Again, this is the Sonic Alchemy podcast. I'm Justin. This is Kevin. We are in a band called the Silver Echo. We should have said all this stuff up front, but here we go. So yeah, what we've been covering is the production process of our new record coming out. And so we'll be doing a follow-up to this, talking about the actual tracking process and getting takes and all that. But you can find us at thesilverecho.com or thesonicalchemy.com. And we'd love to hear from you. So thanks for listening.
Hit us up. Thank you so much. Until the next one.